Welcome to another episode. Today, we're going to be talking about don't sweat the small stuff. Recently, something happened and it was in relation to my wife. I'll share that in a second. And I said to myself, Uche, you need to stop sweating the small stuff. It's not helping you. It's not helping your marriage. It's not helping your relationships. Stop it. So, we're going to talk about what is the small stuff? What does sweating the small stuff mean? What do you do with the small stuff if you're not going to sweat it? But let's start with talking about why you should not sweat the small stuff. I have to give the context of me and my wife for you to understand the example I'm going to give. And my wife and I could not be more different. I'm more of an extrovert, an ambivert actually. She's more of an introvert. I like structure. So I'm the sort of person when I'm going on holiday, I want to know what I'm doing each day. My wife is more free flow. Let us sleep, wake up, and decide what we want to do. As far as the house is concerned, I am the sort of person that always thinks prevention. So let's prevent a mess from happening. My wife is more, let's live in the house. If a mess happens, okay, we'll clean it up and we'll clean up when we want to. There's no right or wrong. Arguably, some people might side with my wife. But this day, my son is just 14, 15 months and he was about to make a mess. So he was feeding himself, which is actually quite exciting to see him doing. And he had a handful of yogurt and whatever he was eating. And he went and he grabbed the chair. Let's just say my reaction wasn't very Christian. And what did that do? It caused a strain in terms of me and my wife. And that's after that episode is when the statement came to my head, Uche, don't sweat the small stuff. So why shouldn't we sweat the small stuff? Number one, it wastes time. While you are spending time on the minors, you are wasting valuable time that you can be spending on the majors. And so there's that statement, don't major on the minors. It wastes time. And don't just gloss over that point. If you waste 5 minutes of your life sweating the small stuff, that is 5 minutes of your life you are never, ever going to get back. Number two, it adds unnecessary weight. Sweating the small stuff adds unnecessary weight. I want you to imagine your life that you carry, in addition to all the challenges and things you have to do going through life, I want you to imagine that you have an extra backpack. And in that extra backpack are stones you are putting in from sweating the small stuff. And those stones, you add to them sometimes daily. Why? Because if you take the example of me and my wife, where this is something that is going to happen regularly. Right? My son is growing up, and so he's going to feed himself and he's going to make a mess. Imagine that. Imagine I was going through that on a daily basis as opposed to deciding what is truly important. So it adds unnecessary weight. The third point is it strains relationships. This is where all this started from. That day, my wife and I, the relationship was strained. I remember we went to bed and the atmosphere in the house was not ideal. For what purpose? That my son had dirty hands and it was going to stain the chair, which we can clean. And if it doesn't clean, so what? I can't believe I'm saying this because I'm being very vulnerable. I'm being accountable to, God knows how many people. But this is true because that little incident brings strain on the relationship with my wife and it feeds into other things. It feeds into us confiding in each other. It feeds into us being intimate with each other. It can even affect our professional life because my wife and I really bounce off each other when it comes to, working. And so the next day I have a problem and I'm thinking, nah, I'm not going to call her because we're kind of fighting. Or she does the same, or she just can't be bothered because, she's still upset from the day before. So sweating the small stuff is a big deal. It's a really big deal, which is why I'm talking to you about not sweating the small stuff. I got a quote or a statement that I think brings this home. And the statement is, when you are on your deathbed, most of the things people worried about won't matter. That's amazing. And that's what sweating the small stuff does, helps us major on the minors. So, what is sweating the small stuff? What I did was I reached out to a few friends, family as well, and I said, when you hear the statement, don't sweat the small stuff, what does that actually mean to you? And they came back with different statements. So I'm going to read out the statement and kind of give an opinion on it, because the diversity of the statements shows that don't sweat the small stuff means different things to different people. To Uche, in one instance, it is, can you stop worrying about whether your son stains the chair with dirty hands? For another person, it is, can you stop worrying about the fact that somebody you live with, whether it's a sibling or a spouse or just a friend, squeezes the toothpaste from the middle? And that begins to have a real issue in the relationship. And you know what I mean. So these are the statements that some people sent to me. Just a selection. The first one, don't focus on what's not done at the expense of what has been done. Celebrate what is done and plan for the rest. I love it. When you are sweating the small stuff, you are always focusing on what remains. But a lot has already happened. How about celebrate what has happened, what you've done, what you've accomplished, and plan for what is undone. Not worrying about it, not being frustrated about it, not being anxious about it, just knowing that there's a lot maybe that still has to be done, but hey, I've made some progress. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. I always love using Facebook as an example. The impact it has on our lives. You have Facebook, it owns WhatsApp, it owns Instagram, but all of this started from the dorm room of Mac. The next statement that came that I quite liked is this one. Don't major on the minors. In the grand scheme of things, some things are not important. This is a big one. Whether it's work, whether it's your personal relationship, don't major on the minors. One example here that I like is when I was in investment banking. There's a way that bankers or every institution, every bank likes to do their slides. They have their color codes and all that stuff. Those are important things. That is majoring on the majors, let's say. But then you come to a particular slide, and I believe, trust me, I've seen it. I have seen two bankers argue on the layout of a particular slide. And the truth is, little difference. And that layout of the slide is not what is going to help the client decide whether or not to work with your bank. That's what we mean by majoring on the minors. And emotions are flying, and people are getting angry, and they begin to say things that they should not say. And the relationship sometimes gets to the point of it being irreparable. Some people decide, I'm not going to work with this manager anymore. Why? Because you majored on the minors. Some people have walked out of jobs because of majoring on the minors. Marriages have broken up because of majoring on the minors. So again, don't sweat the small stuff. Another statement I really like. Don't spend too much time on things that have minimal consequences, similar to not majoring on the minors. And so I want you to actually look at your life. This goes to some people who have perfectionist tendencies. they spend a lot of time, a crazy amount of time, trying to perfect things, and the impact of that extra perfection is completely minimal. In anything in life, you have the point where adding to it, you get to a peak where, this is the maximum benefit you can get from improving it. Improving it anymore, the extra benefit is actually minimal compared to the effort of trying to improve it. So don't do that. Another example I really like that a friend sent was this: keep the primary thing as the main thing, and don't get swayed or distracted by other things that pop up. I love this one because I think it can speak to all of us. Emails. Do you know how productive you feel when you've gone through your emails? Out of those 20 emails, maybe one was very useful or really important. The other ones you could have left until the end of the day. And in your best work zone time, you could have done a really important project. Now, let me tell you something. This email thing is very important. Why? Because many times we will deceive ourselves into feeling very productive because we are going through emails, and we're actually not really doing really productive work. In At Your Best with Karen Newhoff is a really good book. He speaks about our day. In our day, we have our green zones, and those are the times when we do our best work. You want to keep the primary thing the main thing. So in your green zone, work on a good project. All of us have no more than 2 to 4 hours of really good green zones in our day. Some people are morning people. For some people, it's in the afternoon. For another set of people, it's in the evening. Whatever it is for you, make sure that you're doing the right work at that point in time, and not doing things like going through your emails when you can do that at a later date. I love an example from Carla Harris. She's a really successful investment banker, and she talks about how she has set times in the day when she checks her emails, right? Other times she's getting work done. Here's another statement that I really liked. It says, for me, sweating the small stuff is really anything that's irrelevant or doesn't add real value to the big picture of your life, your vision, your destiny. Anything. And again, this is different for each of us. So let me give you an example. I remember there was a time when I was really mindful of, I really have to do some bodybuilding, right? I have to, because my best friend actually is, has a great physique and goes to the gym regularly. And I would see other people and I began to sweat the small stuff. I began to really feel like I really have to get there, get to the gym, build my frame and look a particular way. When I looked at my lifestyle as well as what I have time for, what I'm actually passionate about, I began to get to the point where I thought to myself, Uche, it's only just simply about you being healthy and doing good cardio, right? Whether you have a six-pack or not, it's not really going to have a bearing on your life, your vision, and your destiny. Now, if you're overweight, potentially it could, but you're not overweight and you just have a slim frame. So stop sweating the small stuff. If you want to build, do that. If you can't be bothered, stay healthy and move on with your life. Now, it sounds simple, but if we're honest with each other, aren't there many things that, like this example for me, that you worry about, fret about, are anxious about, and is taking unnecessary time from you and adding mileage to your life and actually destroying your health? So don't sweat the small stuff. A final statement from a friend that came. At work sometimes, we focus on how he or she said it or what they asked us to do, instead of the bigger picture that doing this is good for you and everyone else. Don't sweat the small stuff. Now, if somebody speaks in a particular tone that you don't like, hey, perhaps you can speak to them about it in that one instance. But if it is a habit they have and you can let it go, it doesn't really bother you, let it go. That's what you need to do. Don't sweat the small stuff. I'm going to keep on repeating this statement. I think for your benefit and certainly for me, because I've seen situations where relationships are hindered, spoiled, ruined because we sweat the small stuff. So let's talk about relationships for a second as a specific segment, because life is all about relationships. I'm truly aware, not just for me, but for everybody else, that you are one relationship from the best part of your life, for example. And you can spoil one relationship that actually has a really negative impact on your life. So let's talk about relationships for a second. I love something that someone that responded to my question about don't sweat the small stuff, what they said. The person said, I'm a recovering people pleaser. So it is usually people's opinions of me which might be untrue or completely irrelevant. That's the first thing. Sometimes when it comes to relationships, we let people have way too much power over us. You know, I remember a good example I read in a book. The book is actually called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson, I believe. And he said, you know, some person, a man or a woman, is driving up, the road in their beautiful car. I think he said something like a Porsche. And as he's driving up the road in that beautiful car, people are kind of giving glances and looking at the car drive by. And it goes, the person in the car is probably thinking, hey, they're looking at me, they're checking me out, and the person feels good or great about themselves. And it was like, what the person doesn't realize is the people are imagining themselves in the car. They don't even know what you look like. That was a beautiful lesson for me personally to learn, and I hope you as well. People have their own problems, right? And so stop caring about what people think. And so this person telling me about sweating the small stuff is, I need to stop being a people pleaser, because sometimes some people's opinions for me are completely irrelevant. And what I assume somebody may be thinking is oftentimes completely untrue. Relationships. We need to be patient and kind. Somebody said in relation to this statement, they said, being patient and kind will save us a world of stress and pain if we can train ourselves to focus on the things we get right instead of our trivial differences. When we know that the intentions are pure and from a good place. Simple statements, right? But things that if we genuinely take time to pause and apply, will change our lives. And the final one when it comes to relationships and not sweating the small stuff is this: forgive quickly. Someone said to me, Uche, don't carry long-term emotional baggage for a short-term glitch. Wow. I thought that was amazing. And the point they were making was, out of 365 days of the year, the person maybe is less than their best self on one day. And yes, let's even say they did something significant that hurt you. There are many things you can do in relation to that, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the point is, are you going to let that one day spoil 364 other days? Ooh, what about? Are you going to let that one day spoil 3 years, 10 years, 2 decades? Sometimes we get to a point where there's a problem, there's an issue, and 5 years has passed. And if they ask you, why don't you speak to that person anymore? Why is that relationship strained? What do you say? I really can't remember exactly what happened. The biggest thing for me when it comes to not sweating the small stuff is thinking of the impact it has on relationships. So, what should you do instead of sweating the small stuff? Make a decision. Yeah, that's it. Make a decision that you are no longer going to sweat the small stuff, and you're going to do one of these 4 things. The first one is make a decision on what you're actually going to do. Okay, so let me give you this example. Me and my wife. So my wife and I, if we talk about toothpaste, for example, my wife can press the toothpaste from anywhere that she likes. And guess what? There's nothing wrong with that. Perhaps even I need to just stop being so structured and press the toothpaste from anywhere that I like. But what do? We have 2 separate toothpaste. Yeah, it's a small thing, but if you can't let it go, do something about it. Make a decision. We have 2 separate toothpaste, actually, because we now use different brands of toothpaste. So you need to do something, right, about it. It might be a small tweak, something small that you do. That's it. Do it. The next D is this: delay. The reason I say you want to put delay into it, because sometimes you want to do something about it, but you just don't have the time or the resources, or it's not the right time to do something about it. So delay it. But you've made a conscious decision to delay doing something about it. If you don't do something about it, and if you don't necessarily delay it, delegate it. I realized that I got into a point in my life that I cannot sweat the small stuff anymore. There is no way with my schedule that I'm also going to be spending time trying to figure out when I can meet one person or the other. My calendar. My wife looked at me one day and said to me, Uche, honestly, I know that you like to be in control of many things, but you're going to have to hire a personal assistant. Your personal assistant is going to be doing some basic research for you. They are going to manage your crazy calendar and whatever else that it's not worth it you doing anymore. Let me tell you something. If you're going to grow as a leader, if you're going to grow as a person, if something is your weakness, you're going to have to staff it. Even if it isn't your weakness, even if you love to do it, you're going to have to get to a point where you delegate some of that stuff so that you can focus on the majors. Time is time. If I spend 30 minutes trying to figure out when I can meet 7 different clients this week and going back and forth with them in emails, and that takes me maybe a couple of hours in aggregate, it is not worth my time that I could use to prepare, that I could use to read, that I could use to actually just rest and sleep. You know what I mean? So delegate some things so that you can move forward. Stop sweating the small stuff. And the last one is my absolute favorite. The last one is delete. You need to make up your mind about what it is you are going to delete. I don't mean do, I don't mean delegate, I don't mean delay it. You delete it. That is the ultimate don't sweat the small stuff. One more quick idea. One of the things that frustrates people, and when it comes to sweating the small stuff, is focusing on things that are completely out of your control. And so, I want you to put something that maybe tends to stress you. It might actually be a small thing, right? For example, a parent can be like, I really need to get my child who is in their 20s out of the house and doing something a lot more productive, get a job and just do something. They seem to be relaxing a little bit because they have this house to live in. And then the parent is really stressing and disturbing them and like, do this and do that and do this and do that and do this and do that. That is completely out of their control. So what they can do is, at the top of a blank sheet of paper, they can write, work better with my child to be more productive. Good. They're going to draw 2 big circles that intersect. On the left-hand side, they're going to put what is in my control. On the right-hand side, they're going to put out of my control. And where they intersect, they're going to put area of influence. So, what is in their control? What is in their control is their house and how things are going to happen and be in their house. What is out of their control, for example, is whether or not they get their child to actually apply for jobs or upskill in some way or go and build some professional relationships. That is completely out of their control. What is a potential area of influence? Giving rules about what their child can or cannot do in their house. Perhaps some things that will make the child think, you know what, I got to get out of here, or I have to get a job. The area that is in your control and the area of influence is what we will call process. Focus on the process so you can move forward. The area that is out of your control is what we call outcome. Processes always lead to outcomes, but many times we focus on the outcomes and not the process that get us to those outcomes. This little exercise for any area of your life that is maybe causing some stress is revolutionary if you apply it. So what now? In relationships, don't let the small stuff become the big stuff. If it's not something you can let go of, talk about it. If it's something you can let go of, then leave it. Delete. I'm excited to share this episode with you because in sharing it, even I feel like I've learned quite a bit, and it's been a little bit therapeutic for me letting all this out in this episode and talking to myself as well as you. So, until the next episode, I want you to not sweat the small stuff. If this has been useful for you, share it. Please leave a comment, like it, ask a question. Until next time, stay blessed.